A black woman dressed poorly for a blind date, not knowing that he was a billionaire who fell in love with her at first sight. "I'm sorry, but I think you're in the wrong place. This is a 5-star restaurant, not a shelter." The blonde hostess examined Camila from head to toe with the disdain of someone who had just found trash in her impeccable entrance. Camila Santos, 29, a literature teacher at a public school in the Bronx, stood motionless in front of the reception desk at Le Bernardin. Her faded Lakers sweatshirt and holey sneakers contrasted sharply with the marble and crystal surroundings. 3 months ago, she never imagined that a blind date would lead her to this humiliating moment. "Actually, I do have a reservation," she replied calmly, handing over her cell phone with the confirmation. The hostess frowned, clearly annoyed at having to admit her mistake. Across the room, a man in an impeccable suit watched the scene with growing indignation. Daniel Richardson had arrived 15 minutes earlier, eager to meet the mysterious woman his assistant had described only as someone unlike anyone you've ever met. The truth was that Camila had deliberately dressed poorly. After 2 years of disastrous relationships with men who were more interested in her appearance than her brilliant mind, she had developed a foolproof strategy: to look as unattractive as possible on the first date. If the guy ran away, great. If he stayed, maybe he was worth getting to know. What she didn't know was that Daniel Richardson, 35, was the CEO of Richardson Enterprises, an investment empire valued at $2.8 billion. He had specifically asked his assistant Jennifer to find someone real, authentic, who didn't know who he was. "Table for Richardson," announced the maitre d', guiding Camila through the restaurant while all the other customers stared at her with barely concealed curiosity. Daniel stood up as she approached, and Camila felt something strange happen. His eyes showed no judgment or disappointment. Instead, she saw genuine fascination. "You must be Camila," he said, offering his hand. "Daniel. And I can tell you've made the most memorable entrance I've ever seen in this place." "It wasn't intentional," she lied, accepting the greeting. "Well, maybe a little." Daniel laughed, a genuine laugh that made several heads turn. "Jennifer told me you were a teacher. She didn't mention you were also a rebel." For the first hour, they talked about literature, politics, and education. Camila was surprised to find that Daniel not only followed her arguments about social inequality, but contributed perspectives that revealed a sharp mind behind the corporate facade. "Can I make a confession?" Daniel asked, playing with his wine glass. "I asked Jennifer not to tell me anything about you other than your profession. I'm tired of women researching my life before they even meet me." "Is your life that interesting?" Camila raised an eyebrow. "It depends on what you consider interesting. Some people find money fascinating." It was then that Camila noticed details she had overlooked: the watch that was worth more than her annual salary, the perfect cut of the suit, the subtle deference of the waiters. Her stomach tightened. "Daniel Richardson," she repeated slowly. "Richardson, as in Richardson Enterprises? The company that owns half of Manhattan's commercial buildings." His smile faltered slightly. "Among other things, yes." Camila felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She had just spent 2 hours philosophizing about social inequality with a billionaire. Dressed like a homeless person. "I have to go," she said abruptly, standing up. "Camila, wait." "No," she shook her head, feeling the curious stares of the entire restaurant. "This is a mistake. I don't belong in this world." But as she walked quickly toward the exit, Camila didn't see the expression on Daniel's face. It wasn't disappointment or relief. It was pure determination. For the first time in years, he had found someone who saw him as a person, not a bank account. What neither of them knew was that Jennifer, the assistant who had arranged the date, was at that moment sending discreet photos of the dinner to New York's most widely read gossip blog, along with a message: "Billionaire Daniel Richardson dines with mysterious woman at luxury restaurant." As Camila fled down Park Avenue, her sneakers squelching on the wet asphalt, one question hammered in her mind: why had a man who could have any woman in the world looked at her, really looked at her, as if she were exactly what he was looking for? There, in the face of all the contemptuous looks she had endured that night, she maintained a dignity that only exists in those who have weathered much worse storms and developed a quiet strength that few can recognize at first glance. If this story of prejudice and unexpected love touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple encounter would turn into something that would completely change the rules of two seemingly incompatible worlds. The next morning, Camila woke up to 47 notifications on her phone. Her heart sank when she saw the first headlines: billionaire Daniel Richardson spotted with mysterious woman at intimate dinner, and who is the teacher who won over New York's most coveted bachelor? Her photo, taken discreetly at the restaurant, was splashed across every gossip blog in the city. The comments were even worse. She's clearly after his money, how desperate, he can have any supermodel and he chooses this? Jennifer had sold the story. The assistant Daniel trusted had turned their private date into public entertainment. When she arrived at PS 143 in the Bronx, where she had been teaching for 6 years, Principal Margaret Thompson was waiting for her in the hallway with a worried expression. "Camila, we need to talk. Some parents are questioning your professional conduct." "My conduct?" Camila felt indignation rise in her throat. "For having dinner with someone? You know how it is. A public school teacher associated with this kind of publicity. We need to maintain our reputation." Camila thought of the children in her class, mostly Black and Latino, many living in precarious situations, and how they saw her as an example that it was possible to dream beyond the limitations imposed by the zip code where they were born. Now that was being questioned because she had dinner with a wealthy white man. During lunch, her phone rang. "Daniel. Camila, I saw the news. I'm sorry. Jennifer has been fired, and I'm going to sue every media outlet that published her photo without permission." "That won't solve anything," she replied, watching her students play in the courtyard. "You don't understand. For you, this is just passing gossip. For me, it's my reputation, my job, my life being dissected by strangers on the internet. Then give me a chance to get to know the real you. Away from the spotlight, away from all of this." Camila hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes, but life had already taught her hard lessons about trusting people from different worlds. At age 12, she had lost her mother in a car accident. Her father, a mechanic, worked 3 jobs to keep her in school. She earned a full scholarship to Columbia, graduated with honors in literature, but still faced professors who questioned whether she really deserved to be there, or if she was just another quota. "One chance," she said finally. "But on my terms." They met on Saturday at Riverside Park, away from fancy restaurants and curious stares. Daniel showed up in jeans and a simple shirt, carrying 2 coffees from a street stall. "My research on you," he said, handing her a coffee, "boils down to what you told me yesterday. 0 Google, 0 social media. I want to get to know the real Camila, not the version the internet has created." They walked along the riverbank, and Camila found herself talking about her childhood, her dreams of writing a novel one day, how each of her students carried a story that could inspire the whole world if only someone would pay attention. "What about you?" she asked. "What's it like to carry the weight of billions of dollars?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "You want to know the truth? It's isolating. Every conversation has a hidden agenda. Every woman who approaches me has already researched my net worth. Every friendship is strategic." He stopped walking. "Until you showed up, dressed like you wanted to scare me away, talking about social inequality as if I were just another guy." But as they talked, Camila noticed photographs being taken from a distance. Paparazzi. Always the damn paparazzi. On Monday, the headlines were even worse. Suburban teacher's romance with billionaire, love or interest? A morning TV show devoted 15 minutes to speculating about her true intentions. The worst came on Thursday. A call from Daniel's mother. Victoria Richardson Whitman, matriarch of New York high society, had gotten her personal number and left a message that made Camila's blood run cold. "Miss Santos, I imagine you are an intelligent young woman. Intelligent people recognize when a situation is beyond their capabilities. My son has responsibilities that you cannot comprehend. It would be wise to end this distraction before it becomes embarrassing for everyone involved." Camila listened to the message 3 times. Victoria's aristocratic voice exuded the kind of prejudice disguised as courtesy that she knew well. The same tone she had heard from teachers doubting her intelligence, from colleagues questioning her merits, from strangers assuming she didn't belong in the spaces she had earned through sweat and determination. But something ignited inside her. A flame that had been forged over years of proving she deserved her place in the world. Victoria Richardson Whitman had made a fatal mistake. She had completely underestimated who she was dealing with. That night, Camila called her best friend, Jessica Martinez, a civil rights lawyer she had met at Columbia. "Jess, I need you to help me with something. And it might be the most important case you've ever taken on." Tell me about it, girl. I'm going to need you to investigate some people for me. Very powerful people who think they can intimidate anyone who isn't in their circle. Jessica laughed. You know I love taking down arrogant people. Send me the names. Every new public humiliation, every racist comment disguised as concern, every attempt to make her feel inadequate only fueled something inside Camila that her oppressors couldn't see, a quiet determination forged by years of struggles that had turned her into someone far more resilient and strategic than any privileged elite could imagine. What Victoria and her gang of socialites didn't know was that every attempt at humiliation was being carefully documented, every conversation recorded, every move recorded by someone who had learned early on that in the real world, you only survive if you know how to play the game better than your opponents. For a moment, when she bowed her head in response to Daniel's mother's threatening phone call, everyone might have thought her spirit had been broken, but those who know true strength know that it grows precisely in silence, fueled by injustice until it becomes a storm that no one can predict or control. 3 days after the threatening phone call, Victoria Richardson Whitman was not satisfied with just words. The pressure came from where Camila least expected it. Camila, we need to talk urgently, said Margaret Thompson, summoning her to an extraordinary meeting of the board. We received a call from the Richardson Foundation. They are reconsidering the $2 million donation they promised for our scholarship program. Camila felt her stomach drop. The Richardson Foundation had been the school's salvation: new computers, teaching materials, scholarships so that underprivileged children could attend extracurricular activities. Now, because of her inappropriate association with Daniel, 200 children would lose opportunities that could change their lives. They were very clear, Margaret continued, avoiding Camila's gaze. As long as you maintain this situation, they cannot associate the foundation with the school. It's a matter of image. Camila remained silent for a few seconds, processing the magnitude of the blackmail. Victoria had found her greatest vulnerability: the children she loved and protected. I understand perfectly, she said finally, her controlled voice masking her growing fury. That night, Jessica showed up at Camila's apartment carrying 2 bottles of wine and a bulky folder. Girl, you hit the nail on the head. That Richardson family is a nest of scorpions. They sat down at the small kitchen table while Jessica opened the folder. Victoria Richardson Whitman. 58 years old, married to William Whitman III, heir to a family of bankers. But here's where it gets interesting. Jessica pointed to printed documents. The Richardson Foundation that's blackmailing your school? They have a pretty dirty history. How so? Systematic discrimination. In the last 10 years, less than 3% of donations have gone to schools with a majority Black or Latino population. They have a clear pattern of favoring elite white institutions, but they use a few outlying schools as a front to maintain their status as a charitable organization. Camila studied the documents, her teacher's brain quickly organizing the information. Is that illegal? Technically no, but it's ethically questionable and would create a monstrous scandal if it leaked to the press. Jessica smiled mischievously. Especially considering that Victoria serves on the diversity board of 3 different organizations. But Jessica wasn't finished. There's more. William Whitman, her husband? His bank is being quietly investigated by the FBI for discriminatory lending practices. They systematically denied real estate financing to Black families in specific neighborhoods. Camila felt something ignite inside her. Years of teaching children to think critically, to connect the dots, to question official narratives, all of those skills were aligning for a greater purpose. Jess, I need you to do one more thing for me. Tell me. Investigate Daniel. I want to know if he knows anything about this, or if he's just another privileged person ignoring his family's schemes. While Jessica worked on the legal aspects, Camila began her own investigation. She spent her lunch breaks at the public library researching every member of the Richardson family, every company, every donation. She created detailed spreadsheets, timelines, connections between people and organizations. She discovered that Victoria served on the board of the Metropolitan Elite Academy, a private school that cost $60,000 a year and had not admitted a single Black student in 5 years. She discovered that the family owned shares in companies that had been sued for employment discrimination. He discovered such a clear pattern of institutional racism that he wondered how no one had connected the dots before. The answer came when Jessica brought information about Daniel. He's clean, Jessica said, throwing herself on Camila's couch. In fact, he's the opposite of the family. Over the past 5 years, he has quietly donated tens of millions to social justice organizations. Scholarships for black students, funding for minority startups, legal support for victims of discrimination. Does he know about the family? Not only does he know, but he's apparently been at war with them for years. I found leaked emails from a family discussion where he threatens to publicly expose the foundation's practices if they don't change. Camila processed this information. Daniel wasn't the enemy. He was an ally she didn't even know she had. That's when she received a call that would change everything. Miss Santos. The voice was female, nervous. My name is Patricia Wong. I was an executive assistant at the Richardson Foundation until last week. I just saw your name in the news and I need to tell you something about what they're doing to you. Camila and Jessica met Patricia at a discreet cafe in Brooklyn. The 35-year-old Asian woman trembled slightly as she opened a laptop. I was fired for questioning certain practices, Patricia explained. But before I left, I copied some files. Emails, spreadsheets, recordings of meetings. Things that show exactly how they operate. The laptop displayed a folder with hundreds of documents. Emails from Victoria instructing employees to screen grant applicants based on cultural fit. Recordings of meetings where she openly discussed strategies to keep certain populations out of institutions they funded. But the most shocking was in a recent recording. Victoria's voice was crystal clear. That black teacher needs to learn her place. If she thinks she can contaminate my son with her ideas of racial equality, I'll show her that some people just aren't cut out for our circles. Cut all donations to that school. Make her choose between her dignity and the future of those children. Jessica and Camila exchanged glances. It wasn't just disguised prejudice. It was a recorded confession of racial blackmail. Patricia, Camila said calmly, would you be willing to testify publicly about this? I tried to do the right thing internally for 2 years. They silenced me, humiliated me, and finally fired me when I threatened to expose everything. Patricia closed her laptop with determination. Yes. I'm ready to tell the truth. That night, Camila stayed up late organizing everything into a meticulous presentation. Years of experience creating engaging lessons, explaining complex concepts to children, adapting information for different audiences. All of this would be used to create something Victoria Richardson Whitman would never see coming. She didn't yet know that Daniel was also preparing his own surprise for his mother, or that he had hired the most aggressive civil rights lawyer in the country to sue the family for systematic discrimination. She didn't know that Patricia had made copies of the files and distributed them to 3 different investigative newspapers. What Camila did know was that Victoria had made the fatal mistake of underestimating a teacher from the suburbs who had spent her entire life learning how to turn information into powerful narratives, and who now had all the resources she needed to tell the most important story of her career. That was when everyone thought they had broken her spirit through the cruelest blackmail possible, using the future of innocent children as a weapon, that something extraordinary began to take shape, not only in Camila's brilliant mind, but in a network of allies that Victoria never imagined existed, proving that underestimating an educator is like underestimating a storm that forms silently before completely rewriting the landscape. The following Friday, Victoria Richardson Whitman woke up to a nightmare. Her phone had been ringing incessantly since 6 in the morning. The first article had been published in the New York Times with a devastating headline, Richardson Foundation, Internal Documents Reveal Systematic Discrimination Against Minorities. But the real blow came when she opened her laptop and saw that it wasn't just one article. It was a coordinated expose in 5 major outlets simultaneously, all with the same recordings, the same documents, the same irrefutable evidence. William, she shouted to her husband, who appeared in his robe, still groggy. Have you seen this? How did they get these recordings? Victoria's voice echoed crystal clear on every news site. That black teacher needs to learn her place. If she thinks she can contaminate my son with her ideas of racial equality, I'll show her that some people just aren't cut out for our circles. Cut off all donations to that school. Make her choose between her dignity and the future of these children. The phone rang again. It was the principal of Metropolitan Elite Academy. Victoria, the board has convened an emergency meeting. Your position as board chair is under review. The parents are in a panic. This is a misunderstanding, she began, but he had already hung up. At 9 o'clock that morning, Patricia Wong was live on the nation's most watched morning show, calmly detailing years of systematic discrimination, while giant screens displayed emails and spreadsheets documenting every racist decision. Ms. Richardson kept a literal list, Patricia explained, pointing to documents on the screen. Schools with inappropriate demographics were automatically excluded from donations, regardless of merit or need. Daniel had watched everything from his penthouse, feeling a mixture of horror and admiration. Admiration for Camila for orchestrating something so meticulous and devastating. Horror at finally seeing the full extent of his family's racism exposed publicly. He picked up the phone and dialed. Camila, I saw everything. Daniel, you don't need to explain anything, she interrupted. I know you weren't fully aware. Jessica showed me your own donations. You're different from them. Can I see you? I need to talk to you in person. An hour later, they met in the same park where they had talked weeks before. Daniel arrived with the expression of someone who had seen his family for the first time. I want you to know that I will testify against my mother in any lawsuit you file, he said without preamble. And I will make all the necessary legal resources available. It's not about money, Daniel. It never was. I know. It's about justice. And you've achieved that in a way I could never have imagined. At that moment, Camila's phone rang. It was Margaret Thompson from the school. Camila? You need to know. The Richardson Foundation just called. They want to triple their original donation. And there are 5 other foundations wanting to help too. The children will have everything they need. Meanwhile, at the Richardson mansion, Victoria faced her own methodically orchestrated destruction. Williams Bank was being investigated by the FBI. 3 charities had cancelled all contracts with the Richardson Foundation. Daniel's company's stock, ironically, had risen 12% because investors viewed the family's separation as positive. The mansion's phone rang again. It was the family lawyer. Victoria, I need to be blunt. The evidence is overwhelming. We have recordings of you giving explicit instructions for racial discrimination. Emails detailing strategies to exclude minorities. Spreadsheets showing systematic patterns over 10 years. But those are normal selection practices. Victoria, stop. You were recorded saying black teachers need to learn their place. There's no defending that. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the Richardson Foundation's Twitter account had lost 200,000 followers. Instagram was flooded with angry comments. Victoria's LinkedIn showed that she had been removed from 7 different boards. But the final blow came when Daniel arrived at the family mansion with legal documents. I am completely separating myself from the Richardson Foundation and all family businesses, he announced, placing the papers on the dining room table where, weeks earlier, he had defended Camila. Daniel, you can't. I can and I will. I have created my own foundation. The Santos Richardson Foundation for Educational Equality. Camila will be the executive director. Victoria sat heavily in her chair, realizing she had lost not only her reputation but her own son. All this because of some teacher? No, Daniel replied, looking her straight in the eye. This is because of who you really are. Camila just had the courage to show it to the world. That night, Victoria Richardson Whitman found herself alone in her 15-bedroom mansion, watching news reports about her own downfall. Her personal bank account had been frozen pending investigation. Her high society friends no longer answered her calls. The golf club had temporarily suspended her membership. In less than 24 hours, a public school teacher from the Bronx had methodically destroyed an empire of prejudice built over decades, using only truth and strategic intelligence against the arrogance of those who thought they were above any consequences. As Victoria contemplated the wreckage of her privileged life, one question remained unanswered. How had someone who had spent decades controlling narratives and silencing voices been so completely overwhelmed by an educator she had despised from the outset, proving that underestimating the intelligence and determination of a teacher is like underestimating a storm that completely rewrites the landscape it touches? 6 months later, the transformation was complete and irreversible. Victoria Richardson Whitman found herself in a modest apartment in Queens, far from the mansion she had lost in the divorce. William had divorced her to protect his remaining assets, leaving her alone with the consequences of her actions. The FBI had frozen her accounts, and none of her high society friends returned her calls. Meanwhile, Camila Santos was on the cover of Time magazine as Educator of the Year, recognized for revolutionizing the educational funding system. The Santos Richardson Foundation had become the largest donor to public schools in the country. "You really did it," said Daniel, watching Camila sign contracts to open 20 more educational centers. They had married 3 months earlier in a simple ceremony at the school where she taught, with her students decorating the venue. PS 143 now had an entire wing named after Camila, funded by donations that poured in from across the country after her story went viral. Margaret Thompson had retired, and Camila took over as the new principal. Patricia Wong became the director of transparency for the new foundation, ensuring that there would never again be discrimination disguised as charity. Jessica Martinez opened her own law firm specializing in discrimination cases, with a 6-month waiting list. Victoria, watching the news from her cramped apartment, saw Camila being interviewed on CNN about her book The Teacher Who Overcame Prejudice, which had become a national bestseller. "It was never about revenge," Camila said in the interview. "It was about showing that when you underestimate someone based on prejudice, you are only revealing your own limitations." The most ironic thing was that Victoria's own downfall had inspired changes in dozens of other organizations. Boards across the country began reviewing their practices to avoid the same fate. Daniel found Camila in her new office, planning her next project: full scholarships for 1,000 public school teachers to pursue master's degrees. "You know, that day at the restaurant completely changed my life," she said. "Mine too. You showed me that privilege without purpose is just waste. The best revenge is not to destroy those who underestimate you, it's to build something so great that they spend the rest of their lives wondering how they were foolish enough not to recognize your greatness from the start, proving that true power lies in turning prejudice into fuel for change that benefits thousands of people we don't even know." If this story of how a teacher turned discrimination into social revolution touched you, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that underestimating someone is always the first step toward defeat.